If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all three books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and yes, this is another partly unscripted editorial. I know I've been doing a lot of these recently. I promise you a properly edited video is on the way, but I just wanted to get this out there because, quite frankly, this particular video was a long time coming. A while back, actually way back in March, I made several videos in response to a controversy that never should have been. Controversies involving the Looney Tunes. As you can tell from my backdrop, I am a fan of the Looney Tunes. And, well, I care a lot about how the Looney Tunes are depicted. Well, there was controversy going back a little bit past March, but it really reached its peak in March, specifically on March 8th, International Women's Day, because, well, let's start from the beginning. So technically it began with the debut of Looney Tunes cartoons in very late 2020, when it was announced that Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam would no longer be using guns in this new iteration of the series. They'd kind of been getting away from that in new Looney Tunes as well, but it was officially declared in Looney Tunes cartoons that they would not have guns anymore. Now, this didn't stop either of them from using a whole assortment of other weapons, but they weren't allowed to use guns. The logic behind it was that gun violence is a problem, and having these characters use guns as comedy props was somehow contributing to that problem. Which doesn't really make any sense. You can't really draw any direct line between someone who watched a cartoon with Elmer Fudd hunting Bugs Bunny with a rifle and say that person was directly inspired by that cartoon to then go on a shooting spree. It doesn't pan out. But the fact of the matter is, that's what everyone was saying, so Elmer and Sam were no longer allowed to use guns. Marvin the Martian was still allowed to use a laser gun to the exact same effect, and Sam and Elmer were both allowed to use scythes and swords and sickles and hammers and all sorts of other implements of destruction. And the violence in Looney Tunes cartoons was actually much higher than it had been in a very long time, but thank God there were no guns, right? It made no sense, but the filmmakers, the people behind the series, were going to stick to their non-existent guns, if you will, and not allow these firearms to be in the cartoons so that they would not corrupt the children. You know, that way. They would corrupt the children in apparently other ways by showing them other forms of violence and disturbing imagery, but not by using guns. That's a no-no. But on March 8th, which by the way is also International Women's Day, the controversy with the Looney Tunes really heated up. It was also around this time that Space Jam: A New Legacy was just starting its ad campaign. And on March 8th, an article was published that declared Pepe Le Pew to be a character that needed to be removed from the zeitgeist because he normalized rape culture. How does he normalize rape culture, you ask? Well, you see, he romantically pursues Penelope Pussycat because he thinks she's a skunk, and she's constantly fending him off because she's not interested, largely due to his aroma. And that's about it. He never actually does anything to her other than invade her personal space, lavishing her with kisses, and then getting clobbered for it, clawed to pieces, slammed with hammers, all sorts of things you can think of. He never actually raped anyone, but rape culture apparently just applies the term rape to any sort of unwanted advances, from actual rape to just looking at a woman and thinking, hey, she's attractive. That's the impression I'm getting these days, at least, because rape culture has been applied to so many different things that it seems to have lost its definition. Moreover, it was just as ridiculous to say there was cause and effect here as there was with including guns as comedy props. I cannot think of a single case in which you could draw a direct line from Pepe Le Pew cartoon depicts Pepe as not taking the hint that nobody's interested in him, leading directly to people raping other people and sexualizing other people and being generally horrible in a sexual manner. There's no connection there, completely different worlds. But because of the crazy times we live in, it caused a panic-induced reaction. Pepe Le Pew had a scene in Space Jam: A New Legacy in which he is told his behavior is inappropriate, because the filmmakers of Space Jam: A New Legacy didn't get the joke either. That scene, which conveys a lesson of not being aggressive when somebody is not interested in you, was cut completely. And Warner Brothers announced quite loudly that Pepe Le Pew would no longer be appearing in any future Looney Tunes projects. He was effectively canceled, completely censored. He's gone now. They have no intention of bringing him back. Well, it's been a little while since then, and some interesting things have happened. First of all, Elmer and Sam have their guns back. Sam was the first to get his guns back. We saw that in the Space Jam: A New Legacy trailer, where Daffy goes, "Sam, shoot the ball," and Sam interprets this literally, drawing his guns, blasting the ball, and then blasting Daffy because he got carried away. It's one of the few jokes in Space Jam: A New Legacy that's kinda, sorta, almost on the cusp of being, but not quite actually funny. But you'll notice it was in the ads from the very beginning, after this loud proclamation that the characters would never have their guns again. And do you know what happened? Nothing. There wasn't a sudden spike in gun violence inspired by this trailer. I mean, gun violence hasn't really gone down, unfortunately, but it hasn't gone up because of this either. And this led to, in the second season of Looney Tunes cartoons, Elmer getting his gun back for one of the episodes. He was finally allowed to hunt Bugs Bunny the way he always had. And you'll notice nothing resulted from that either. And quite frankly, I think the reason they gave Elmer his gun back in Looney Tunes cartoons is because the second season is going completely off the rails. I said that the first season kind of upped the violence. Well, the second season upped the violence from even that. It contains actually one of the most gruesome episodes ever. You may have heard of it. It's the one where Bugs is going up against an Egyptian mummy. There are actual human guts in that episode. No ambiguity, and they're juicy too. There's full-blown nightmare fuel in this series. You can tell by this point that this was a show made by people who formerly worked on Ren and Stimpy. So it seems to me like they just figured, if we're already going this far, what's the point of not allowing Elmer to carry a shotgun? And frankly, that just means they caught up with the rest of us. Because none of us ever bought this explanation. Saying that the guns were promoting violence that you didn't want to spread around while showing a whole bunch of other gruesome imagery, that was ridiculous. That's like if someone were to open an all-you-can-eat buffet full of nothing but junk food and desserts, and as everyone's filing in to fill their plates and stuff their faces, suddenly the manager comes out and goes, "Wait a minute, everyone, wait a minute. We're not serving you these brownies. These brownies are full of sugar, and they could give you the diabetes if you eat them. So you're not allowed to have these brownies. Enjoy all of the pizza and French fries and ice cream and cookies and cotton candy and fried butter on a stick that you want. There's all sorts of that, and you can eat as much as you want, but no brownies. Those are bad for you." Isn't that ridiculous? If the manager actually cared about your health, that all-you-could-eat buffet would be a portion-controlled salad bar. They weren't fooling anyone, and I think they realized it, which it's about time they did. That being said, I do still think that Looney Tunes cartoons is kind of crossing the line at times. Again, there were actual human organs in that one mummy episode. that's not really Looney Tunes. Even knowing that Looney Tunes would push the envelope more than Disney ever did, even back in the Golden Age, that's still going a little too far. But who cares at this point? They've already done it, the episodes are out there, and quite frankly, society doesn't seem any worse because of it. There has not been an increase in gun violence because of these cartoons. So, what was even the point of removing the guns in the first place? Look, I'll be upfront with you guys. I do believe that it is the right of somebody to own a firearm if they choose to, and if they have passed the process. There actually are plenty of things in place to ensure, or at least try to ensure, that unstable individuals don't get guns. It doesn't mean that this system is perfect, and it doesn't mean that a person can get a gun when they are stable and then later become unstable, but there are those measures in place. And I do believe that it is a right for a person to bear arms for any legitimate reason. If it's defending your property, if it's hunting for food, whatever. However, I also believe that owning a firearm is not just a right, it is a responsibility. And with that responsibility comes a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration. Most relevant to this particular discussion, if you have children in your home and you also have a firearm in your home, it is your responsibility to, 1, make sure that firearm is secure and in a place that the children cannot easily get to it, and 2, make sure those children understand the severity of what a gun can do. You provide them with that education. You tell them, this is not a toy. This can actually hurt and maybe even kill someone. You do not mess around with it, whether it's loaded or unloaded, because you don't know, and you should not mess around with it. It's not for kids. That, I believe, is important. Why that somehow gets lost in the shuffle? Well, it's simple. Because it's much easier to point at a cartoon and say, this is the source of all of our problems, let's get rid of that, than it is to actually take personal responsibility and admit that maybe, just maybe, you screwed up in raising your child and you didn't really impart to them the significance of what a gun should be used for and when it should not be used. And in addition to that, if you really think your child can't tell the difference between a cartoon and reality, and by extension believe they're going to start using that gun thinking they'll just blast someone and it won't mean anything in the long run, then you really need to take responsibility in explaining to them the difference. Of course, in my experience, children generally do know the difference between fiction and reality, but maybe I just ran with a very specific group of people that doesn't represent the whole. Who knows? But that still leaves us with the issue of Pepe Le Pew. Where is he? Well, boy have I got news for you. If you haven't been following Looney Tunes cartoons, strap yourselves in. So first of all, there's one place where Pepe Le Pew has not been censored, at least not yet. And that is in, of all places, a tabletop skirmish game, which I know about because I backed it on Kickstarter. It's from the company CMON. They've done several games you may have heard of. World of Smog, I think they did a Wacky Racers game, things like that. Well, they've got a game coming up called Looney Tunes Mayhem. And there's going to be a core game that has 4 minifigs of Bugs, Daffy, Elmer, and I believe the Tasmanian Devil. And there's an expansion that has Wile E. Coyote, the Roadrunner, Tweety, and Sylvester. Both of those will be available in stores eventually, but if you backed it on Kickstarter like I did, you got some bonus figures that are not going to be available in stores. Characters like Lola with her original design, Speedy Gonzales, Marvin the Martian, Porky Pig, and both Pepe Le Pew and Penelope Pussycat. They are both still in the game, I believe. I mean, when all of this went down, my first thought was, well, one of my first thoughts after I'd gotten through all the other stuff was, I wonder what that means for the game I backed. Well, I recently got an email update that highlighted Pepe Le Pew, so as of this moment, he's still available for the game if you backed it on Kickstarter. If he had been available as a store character, if he was going to be put out there into the store and not be a Kickstarter exclusive, I have a feeling that might be different. But I guess they figure since he's not going to be widely distributed on the mass market, unless it's through resales or something, there was no point in removing him from there. And I am pleased that's the case, because I backed it so I could have those extra figures. I expect all of them. But even so, he remains absent everywhere else. However, getting back to Looney Tunes cartoons, there's something in that series which, if it is not definitive proof that censoring Pepe Le Pew was completely pointless and the people who demanded his censorship didn't actually care about Looney Tunes, then it is at least very, very strong evidence in that direction. The very last episode of Looney Tunes cartoons first season, which debuted at the end of April, so roughly 2 months after the whole controversy went down. The very last segment of that last episode is called Saddle Sore. It is a Yosemite Sam solo cartoon in which he is trying to break a wild horse and saddle him and declare himself the greatest cowboy in the land. Naturally, because this is a Looney Tunes short, he's gonna fail, and fail spectacularly. Towards the end of this cartoon, he decides that the best way to get close to the horse without being noticed is to dress up as a mare, which puts him in the most ridiculous brony costume you have ever seen. And when he gets close to the horse and the horse notices him, the horse literally becomes Pepe Le Pew in all but appearance. Same mannerisms, same voice, same accent, same declarations of love, same shtick of grabbing the object of his affections, lavishing that object with kisses and not letting go. It is literally Pepe Le Pew's routine. And this cartoon, I remind you, aired after the controversy. The controversy where Pepe Le Pew got censored went down at the very beginning of March. This cartoon debuted at the very end of April. That means that, at the very least, this cartoon was in post-production when all of this controversy was going down, and at the very most was complete and just waiting to be uploaded. Now, naturally, this points towards the hypocrisy of Warner Brothers in this whole scenario, because they were loudly proclaiming that Pepe Le Pew was a thing of the past, an artifact from a more misogynistic time, and they were not going to have anything to do with him moving forward. And then they dropped this cartoon where Pepe Le Pew basically managed to sneak in disguised as a horse. Obviously, that is a two-faced thing to do. If they really cared about what they were saying, if they really meant it, they would have seen this controversy and not just gotten rid of Pepe Le Pew, but also canned this cartoon. Doesn't matter how much it cost to make, they would have swallowed the loss and shelved it and never let it see the light of day. But they did. So naturally, they're gonna get called out for that by me. I'm not saying the cartoon should be taken down, mind you, but you cannot have that cartoon up there, and yes, it is still up on HBO Max. You cannot have it up there while also saying that Pepe Le Pew is completely gone. Clearly he's not. But it's not just Warner Brothers that I find fault with here. I'd also like to know, where was that crowd that was so anxious to see Pepe Le Pew disposed of when Saddle Sore made its grand debut? Supposedly, these are the people who are going to be the future of the Looney Tunes fandom. We are now appealing to these people because they know what is true and just, and they will not tolerate such inappropriate humor. So, where were they? They were in an uproar on International Women's Day, but when this cartoon debuted, crickets. Total silence. Nothing. Not a single word was spoken. In fact, you could look at this and say, since the horse is going after Yosemite Sam, who is disguised as a female horse, that the controversy could now be looked at as adding an extra layer of homophobia and transphobia. Yet Pride Month came and went, and still nobody talked about it. Where was this crowd that's supposedly the new face of the Looney Tunes fandom? For that matter, where were those people when Space Jam: A New Legacy hit theaters? Because that movie tanked. Boy, if I were the filmmaker who was trying to appeal to this woke crowd by sanitizing everything and trying to follow what I thought were the trends, I'd be so embarrassed. Now, maybe this is just my own perspective, but it seems to me like the reason there was no backlash against Saddle Sore was because the people who wanted Pepe Le Pew gone never cared about the Looney Tunes in the first place. They weren't fans. They didn't actually want the series to improve. They didn't want to do anything to actually help against misogyny and sexual misconduct or anything. They just wanted to feel good about causing destruction and get accolades for ruining other people's good time, saw an opportunity where they could not only do it, but get a lot of attention because it was International Women's Day and an upcoming movie was just starting to advertise itself, and once they'd gotten what they wanted, they moved on to their next target and never looked back. I mean, that's sure how it looks. I suppose I can't definitively prove it, but then again, what other explanation is there? The fact of the matter is that Pepe Le Pew's censorship was hollow posturing. It was a completely pointless move meant solely to get the studio brownie points, and they didn't even care that much about getting those brownie points apparently, because they just went ahead and did almost the exact same thing that they were getting in trouble for in the first place. Well after they had actually made their declaration. There is no reason whatsoever for Pepe Le Pew to still be censored. And if you want to talk about updating him, like I said back when this whole thing first broke, he's already been updated. In New Looney Tunes, he was transformed into a James Bond parody who is usually placed opposite a Fox spy named Claudette, who is far more proactive in fighting back against his affections. In fact, he's actually far more tame in flirting with her. He's already been updated, and the James Bond idea, that actually works. It's a good way to update the character without losing his original shtick. So why not just go forward with that? It kind of worked. It was one of the better ideas that New Looney Tunes put forward. Or, don't bother updating him. Recognize what the original joke was, which is that Pepe Le Pew was a parody of people who think they are Casanovas, but in reality they're just creeps, and go forward with it that way. Plenty of people all over the world got it, and they got it for years, until one guy realized that he didn't get the joke, and rather than just admit to it, tried convincing everyone else that they didn't actually understand what was really going on. And before anyone tries saying that the article really did hit the nail on the head when it came to how Pepe Le Pew should be interpreted, I remind you that same article also declared that Speedy Gonzales was a racial caricature and demanded his censorship as well, even though that had already happened back in the early days of the second millennium's beginning, and it went over about as well, because even though Speedy was gone for a little while, it turned out the people he was supposedly caricaturing love him and respect him and find him to be a great character and didn't want him gone. All this talk about being on the wrong side of history, I got news for you. Anyone who wants Pepe Le Pew censored, you're on the wrong side of history. Because this has happened before. Another aspect of the Pepe Le Pew censorship that's totally ridiculous is looking at the sort of stuff that was included in Space Jam: A New Legacy, the stuff that didn't get cut. References to R-rated horror movies, blatant advertising for Game of Thrones. People, there is a sequence in the film in which Rick and Morty, from the show Rick and Morty, are on screen for a solid 30 seconds where it's just them talking. Rick and Morty is absolutely not for children. And how about this? Just for a moment, let's play along with that ludicrous argument that fiction somehow has such a great impact on the world that it can actually cause deviancy, which, that whole argument wasn't disproven when that particular guy who wrote about comic books was revealed to be a hack fraud, but whatever. Let's play along with it for a moment and assume that suddenly it really is hard science now. You cannot really make a solid case that Pepe Le Pew is directly responsible in any way for rape culture or sexual misconduct. You can't do it. But with Rick and Morty, their fan base has a reputation for being especially toxic. And to be clear, I do not believe that Rick and Morty causes that toxicity. I know plenty of people who watch Rick and Morty who are perfectly sane. I think what's really going on is that people who were always toxic were drawn to Rick and Morty and then became so outspoken that people started perceiving the entire fandom as being that way. But we're playing along with the argument for a moment. You can actually make a solid argument that Rick and Morty can inspire bad behavior because, like I said, the fandom is known for bad behavior. You go back to Pepe Le Pew and it's like, well, let's see. Pepe Le Pew cartoons are about a skunk romantically pursuing a cat who's not interested in him. Something, 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 bunch of stuff we can't really say. Suddenly rape culture. Where's the connection? You have to just sort of assume that the one leads to the other, but you can't draw that direct line. But you go back to the Rick and Morty fandom, well, here's a Reddit thread of a bunch of Rick and Morty fans bullying somebody because they said something they didn't approve of. Here's a video of a Rick and Morty fan throwing a tantrum in a fast food restaurant. Here's the creator of Rick and Morty saying something controversial. Gee, you can draw all sorts of lines there, and again, I'm not saying that that actually makes sense, but if you're going by the filmmaker's logic that the one directly leads to the other, then there is no reason at all that Rick and Morty should have been in this film while Pepe Le Pew was cut. It makes no sense. Either get rid of all the controversial and potentially harmful stuff, or don't get rid of any of it. You can't have it both ways. But then again, if you get rid of all the controversial stuff, what will you have to advertise in your feature-length commercial? But again, to be clear, I don't believe that Rick and Morty inspires bad behavior or is the direct cause of bad behavior any more than Pepe Le Pew is. I'm saying that by the filmmaker's own logic, they should not have included Rick and Morty as cameos, because you can actually make a better case for Rick and Morty causing bad behavior than you can for Pepe Le Pew. By their own logic. Again, I'm not saying that's actually the case. I don't believe that's the case. In conclusion, it's pretty clear at this point that the people behind the Looney Tunes at this point don't know what they want. Or rather, they don't know what we want. They think they know what we want, and they certainly will loudly proclaim that they know what we should want, but they don't actually know what we want. Then again, even when they are telling us what we should want, they're still giving us the original thing they told us we shouldn't have anyway. It is utterly ridiculous. Look, the Looney Tunes didn't need fixing. The Looney Tunes are irreverent comedians. They were never politically correct. They're never going to be politically correct. Why try forcing them to be? It doesn't work when you try to do that. And if you think it does, remind me again, how is Space Jam: A New Legacy faring? Is it making any money? Is it getting any positive reviews? Is anyone going to be talking about it by the end of the year? The answer to all of those questions is no. A big fat no. Comedy itself is politically incorrect, and the Looney Tunes embody comedy. I'm not saying that somebody should use comedy as an excuse to go out and try offending people. If you're going to set out to deliberately offend people, everyone's going to know it and they're going to call you on it. But that doesn't mean that you should censor yourself and sanitize yourself to the point where you're just not interesting anymore. Or that you should sanitize only certain aspects while amplifying others, because then you just look stupid. You look like you don't know what you're doing. And maybe these people don't really know what they're doing. Fact of the matter is, though, Elmer and Sam have their guns back, and the world isn't any worse for it. There are still bad things happening in the world, but it's not because of that. And Pepe Le Pew? Completely pointless censorship. He should come back. Well, feels good to finally get all of that out there. I can't believe I'm even saying any of this, really. Such are the insane times we live in.
If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.